Welcome to Self-Helpful. I'm your guide, Kevin Miller, and I curate the sea of new personal development messages to bring the most influential leaders onto this show. Join me as I question my guests to better understand their counsel so we can all integrate the wisdom into our lives, because we all want to elevate our own experience and improve the way we show up for others. The Self-Helpful Podcast is presented by Ziglar, your premier source for equipping coaches. Visit Ziglar.com. Hello, Self-Helpful listeners. In this episode, how putting your needs first serves others best. This is part one on a series about boundaries. I spent most of my life with zero boundaries, thinking I was doing the world and everyone in it a favor. Instead, I found myself serving others with a bitter heart or just a worn out heart, to the point where some of those closest to me actually told me to just go take care of myself so that I could take care of them better. I still grapple with the concept, however, a lot, and I need more help. I bet you might as well. So I invited Terri Cole to the show. She's our expert. She's a licensed psychotherapist, global relationship and empowerment expert, and the author of a new book, Boundary Boss, the essential guide to talk true, be seen, and finally live free. The message in her book is the muse for our show together here. Terri reaches over 450,000 people weekly through her blog, her social media platform, and her popular podcast, The Terri Cole Show. Let's get into it. Terri, this topic of boundaries is one I have had knowledge of for quite a while, and a little learning maybe, but your book came along at a time when I think I'm ready. Is that fair? So let's dive into it. I want to figure out how to embrace it. Really, I maybe even find peace with it, which I would assume is kind of at the core. Because for somebody who's if there's a spectrum of boundaries, and I'm way down the line on the bottom end of it, it feels like I'm looking for some paradigm shift. Do you find that that's what's often needed? It's not just a gradual thing. Somebody needs a switch flipped.
Yes, because you think, and I know you just this much, and still I know enough to know that you think by overgiving, being present, being Superman, being super dad, saying yes, yes, yes to all the things, that is in your heart of hearts. Part of that is to be loving. Part of that is to show up. Part of that is to be a good man, to be a good person, to be a good partner, to be a good dad, all the things. And yet, the most painful, I guess, for me in my own life, realization of what I was doing, because I was doing all the same things that you're describing, was through a story I actually tell in the book, but I'll give you a precursor to it.
Yeah.
One of my sisters she always just had more problems in her life than other ones of my sisters. I have 3 older sisters. And she was in a bad relationship with someone who was abusive, and she was drinking alcoholically, and this person was doing drugs, and she was living in a house in the woods with no running water, like literally, actually, with someone who was physically abusive to her. So this was very, very distressing to me. And I was crying and talking to my husband, who I think Vic was probably just my boyfriend at the time, and talking to my therapist, and finally being like, what am I going to do? Like, what am I going to do? I was trying to throw money at it. I was talking to her. She would tell me what he was doing. I would cry hysterically. And my therapist was like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, I can't just do nothing.
Yeah.
And she was like, let me ask you something, Terri. What makes you think you know what your sister needs to learn in this lifetime? And I was like, I don't know, Bev. I think we can agree she doesn't need to learn it in a house with no running water with a crackhead who beats her. Can we agree that it doesn't have to be that way? And she was like, no, because I'm not God. I don't know. And neither do you. But do you know what's really happening for you in this? And I was like, obviously not. So maybe you could enlighten me. And she said, Terri, you've worked for years to create internal harmony and peace. You have a pretty harmonious life. Your sister's dumpster fire of a life is really messing with your peace.
Yeah.
And you really want it to stop. So whatever you need to do, you want her pain to end so your pain can end.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, right, but is that like whatever? So my thought though, Kev, before this, I thought I'm just like kind of Mother Teresa-y. I'm just a lover like that. I'm just going to help all the people who need help. I'm just going to do the thing. From that moment forward, I was like, oh my God, I'm trying to control
Mm-hmm.
my sister's outcome because her being in this dangerous situation is so distressing to me that I'm willing to do anything to end it, but it's not mine to end. So I was like, so what do? I didn't even know I had a choice. I thought I had to do what I was doing. Like I literally didn't even know there was another option. And she said, how about some boundaries? You don't have to listen to your sister talking about this abusive guy. You don't have to let her tell you all the crap that you already know.
Yeah.
So I talked to my sister and said, I totally love you. Here's the thing. I can't listen to this. It's too distressing. But if you ever really want to get out, I'm still your person. And like within 9 months, maybe we talked twice in that period of time, she called me and was like, hello, are you still my person? Because I'm ready to get the hell out of here. And I was like, I'm literally getting in my car. She got sober, went back to school. But here's speaking to your point, Kevin, of like, you need a paradigm shift. You need to know what is on the other side of better boundaries that isn't on the other side of disordered boundaries. My sister got to be the hero of her own life. Instead of me centering, because this is what we do when we auto advice give, when we think we know, when we try to fix all the things, what are we really doing? Centering the other person's situation on ourselves as the solution, which was so painful for me to like wrap my skull around. I was like, super not Mother Teresa, if that's what's actually happening. But to see my sister thriving in her own life and not having me, because in my family of origin, I was the hero child, even though I was the youngest. I was the designated oldest, it's called, where even though you might be chronologically youngest, but you still like acted as the oldest. And how nice to be let off the hook, let myself off the hook, a hook that I couldn't even have been on because I couldn't have fixed what was happening for my sister, you know?
So let me ask, and I'm going to say a couple things and try to preface it with, I'm going to say these things and know that I need to have grace for myself. Okay.
Yep.
So in trying to practice grace for myself, which is a continual process, what I heard or what I received a little bit from you saying, or what you said there is some of my, or a lot of my efforts to be a caretaker and do everything, be the fixer, be Superman, super dad, all that kind of stuff is selfish. Because I really just want, like you said, I want, in your case, I want your sister to feel better so that I feel better. It's self-focused. Everybody just be at peace and happy so I can be at peace. Because if you're not, and then the next thing, and this came up a lot as I studied your book, Terri, was the issue of responsibility. And that I take responsibility. So selfishness, I take responsibility in areas for people and things that I shouldn't, and I rob them. Your line is great. I wrote that down. They need to be the hero of their own life, not me. And I want to be the hero. That is a part of my DNA, which is the next point in realizing that it is so much my identity. That's who I am. That's who I have always been. When I was a professional cyclist with my teammates, I was the guy who took care of everything because I had to do. And you said this somewhere in the book. I may have the page number written down somewhere that it was on one of the lists, that your list just nailed me, most all of them. And I'll reference some of them, but the one of having to do more. I've got to know that I did more. Otherwise, and it's almost like I'm not only reaching for the external approval, I'm looking for my internal approval. So even if somebody doesn't know, I'm not doing more to be altruistic. This isn't some religious thing of do something, the scripture, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing and just give selflessly. That's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to gain my own approval. So am I tracking pretty stereotypically here?
I mean, yes, for someone who has disordered boundaries, but also is high functioning codependent, which is what my next book is going to be about, which, I talk a little bit about in this book. But the way we're describing these disordered boundaries where we are auto advice givers and over functioning and over giving and overly invested in. So if we were to break down, what does it mean, according to me, to be codependent? It's a lot of times it's not the way we think. It's not necessarily the Melody Beatty codependent no more. You have to be involved with an addict, all about enabling, under and over functioning. Yeah, it can be that, but it's not just that. So codependency means you're overly invested in the feeling states, the outcomes, the decisions, the circumstances, the relationships of the people in your life to the detriment of your own internal peace. So that's the thing, because here's the thing, Kevin, you're a lover, I'm a lover, we love our people, we're involved. We of course, we want them to have what they want. Of course, we're invested in the happiness of our family and the people that we love. But when it is to the detriment of our own internal peace, like I was invested in my sister's situation to the detriment of me being able to enjoy my own life. I couldn't until I figured that out, until I had the therapist who told me it wasn't mine to figure out. But I didn't understand that. So I think that what we're really talking about, a lot of the behavior you're describing is like overgiving, overfunctioning. But the thing that people don't understand about codependency is that at its core is disordered boundaries, for sure, because we're constantly overstepping. But it's also a covert or an overt bid to control.
Okay, let's go there. And it's interesting. You're the second person in a row who has a or real close on each other, has a book and a platform primarily for women. Mm-hmm. I don't happen to be a woman. Mm-hmm. And everything I hear you saying, I think men so desperately need and are so dramatically, even more so, unaware of. I mean, the whole word codependent is not a term that you're going to find any group of guys talking about. Nope. Hardly any. And yet it's one of the primary labels that I accept, because I am dramatically have been codependent as the stereotypical, what do my kids call me? The alpha, male, or they have a different name, but just, consummate heterosexual white American male guy. That's me. And yet that's what I have been in my efforts to think I'm doing good, think I'm being valiant. That's a word that I use a lot, valiant. And because I have been really hurt by some of the relationships that I have hurt in my efforts. And I thought I was being a rock star. I thought I was being Gladiator, saving the world. And I actually hurt people in it. And that in and of itself is devastating. It's probably one of my primary hurts. Just Kevin's wounds is one of those, is that here I was thinking I was really just that, being valiant, being the hero. And I actually hurt people. And that is so hard to accept. Yeah. And yet I think, go ahead.
What I was going to say, though, is like for people who are sort of auto advice givers, who are always there with the second someone needs something, you're like, I think you should do this. I did this in the past. I know people. I've got resources. Instead of auto fixing in your mind, the next time someone comes to you with anything, learn to ask expansive questions.
Okay.
That's all you have to do, literally. It doesn't mean you're never going to give someone your opinion on something, but your job is to have faith that your children will figure it out for themselves, that your wife needs you to listen, doesn't need you to fix, because it feels so depersonalizing. So if someone says, well, I'm in this situation, I don't know what to do, you can say, okay, but your gut instinct is good. So if you did know what to do, what do you think it would be? Take a guess. What does your gut say? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? Which way are you leaning? Right? What are we conveying to others? When we ask expansive questions, we're saying, Nobody knows better than you what you should do. I have faith that you'll figure it out, or you won't. But the reality is it's your life to figure out. It's different with kids. Kids come to us because, there can be sort of a mentorship element of parenting, even adult children. But with my kids, I will still always start with, what are you thinking?
Mm-hmm.
What does your gut say?
Well, I have not done that well. I think my first step, Terri, has just been I don't even need the question asked to me. I can just overhear a conversation and, that there's something, they heard something in the car and I'm out in the driveway trying to fix it. I wasn't asked. I was not expected. Yeah. Thank you for laughing. And I've just had to just shut up, Kevin. Don't do anything. Just sit there. And then and this has been going on for a few years, a wonder to watch, and just, they took care of it. They took care of it. They didn't need me to, didn't want me to. One of my dear older daughters, even at one point said, she was sharing something and she said, Dad, don't do it. Don't fix it. I don't need you to. I need to learn how to do this. So I'm just telling you, but please don't do it for me. And the amount of effort and wear and tear on my soul that I had been doing for so many years. And my wife's gone through a time as well of kind of breaking off from me in her own growth and realizing how empowering it is for her not to rely on me. And yet it still feels bad though, Terri. It still feels bad over here to not do anything, to know that there's a problem issue. I know I can take care of it right now, and to not do it.
Right. But let's look at it.
Okay.
Let's look at it from a different point of view. Okay. Let's look at it from the point of view of, rather than bringing that spotlight on you.
Yeah.
Real love is bringing the spotlight on them. So it doesn't mean you have to do nothing. You can engage in saying, what are your thoughts? Right? You can engage without having the answers. And I think that that's an ego thing that we have to get to, where it's like, can you shine the spotlight on the strength of your kids? Because here's what ends up happening with parents, right? When we constantly jump in, especially when I raised teenagers with my son, with my husband. It's like, kids just getting it. I married a widower. So these kids were like 12, 14, 16 when I came in. So they were so bad, so acting out, just awful. I thought they were all going to be in jail. They're not. They're all upstanding dads, have their own families. But I swear, that was 25 years ago. There was definitely a period of time where I was like, wow, they're all going to be in jail. But what would happen is my husband would be wanting to bail them out. We were paying for an apartment for one of our kids. And then 4 months later, he comes and he's like, they're going to kick me out because I didn't pay the rent. And so I need $7,000 and whatever. And my husband was like, I'm writing a check. And I ended up talking to him and saying, listen, when you continue to bail any of the kids out in this way, what you're saying to them is, the kid is saying to you, I think I'm a loser. And you're saying, I agree. Mm-hmm. So is that the message you want to send? The bottom line is, he got himself into this mess. He can get himself out, whatever that means. So I was like, we don't want to collude with this low self-esteem this kid is feeling. So when a parent is like, I'm so afraid you're going to fail, I'm going to do it for you. Yeah. The kid is like, oh my God, I am incapable. So there's something about letting kids learn on their own, which means there has to be some consequences for actions at some point. And when we're auto fixers, a lot of times we don't want anyone else having consequences. We just want it to all be okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But why? I mean, I look at that and, even in my own growing up, I was very independent. My parents let me do my own thing, and I appreciate that. I learned, I grew, I was strong. And yet, why is that not intuitively a part of my reaction with other people? Because it can be one of my peers, one of my guys, and he shares something, and my inherent feeling, my natural feeling is to take some aspect of responsibility. Like I need to help fix that. And I have to just step back and watch myself and go, no, I don't have the ability to the bandwidth to deal with it. And it's not my responsibility. There is a grown man. He can take care of it, but it's so interesting. It's a me, which brings back, it feels like a me problem. Obviously it's a me problem. And I keep playing with the term, I don't know if it's fair. And again, I'm going to try to have grace, but it almost seems arrogant.
Oh, it is. But here's the thing. It's not consciously so. That's exactly what I felt when I had this realization in my late 20s, where I was like, what? Who the hell am I that I literally think I actually legitimately know what everyone else in the world should be doing. Like, I think I know that, but that isn't it. It's not a conscious thing. The truth is your heart's in the right place, but what you have to look at to be able to stop doing it is what is so distressing about allowing other people to have their feelings, about supporting others in your life to be self-determined and sovereign. You have to know, like you have to let the chips fall where they may, especially when they're not your friggin' chips.
Well, then you're back to the responsibility. Okay, I'm gonna shelf responsibility just for a second, because you said something a minute ago. Baseline of boundaries issues is, that we overstep our boundaries. We go out there, we caretake and be codependent and whatnot. And you said we take care of others, serve others to the detriment of our own internal peace. So if I'm just me, okay, I'm just a guy, and let's say I wake up in a city and not all alone, and I don't have the big family and married and whatever. It's just me. I'm single. Let's say I work for myself like I do now. I've got, just casual friendships. I'm kind of good. I'm not codependent. I'm not attached. I'm not having boundary issues. But the moment that I decide to get intimate or ingrained with somebody, whether it's a close friendship, whether it's a romantic interest, and then, on and on, kids or whatnot, by proxy, I tend to, and I'm asking you, I feel like the culture tends to expect that we are doing that for a benefit, obviously, but we're also doing it that we're giving up our own, not peace, but we do to us. I mean, again, culturally, it seems like we do that. We expect that this is going to be give and take now. This is going to be compromise. This is going to be, I'm supposed to put others first. And now, and especially now, if we want to jump over into the religious realm, which is what I grew up in, the Bible Belt of the South, that's the point. You're there and you serve others. Serving self is not, I know, but that's a foundation of our culture. It's interesting, Terri. I had Tama Bryant on the show about a year and a half ago, who's now the president of the APA, the American Psychological Association. And one of her efforts, I know, was to bring spirituality into therapy, because she said it is a bedrock. Just regardless of whether what your beliefs are, spirituality is a bedrock of humanity, so it should be a part of therapy. I appreciated that, and I think that's a great place to look at that. We're, from a religious aspect, especially, which is not spirituality, but from religious, to serve others, put them first. And so your statement of this perspective, it's such a foundational 180 from this aspect. It's by proxy kind of a boundaryless perspective. Right,
but we have to question, though, if taking over someone else's problem is putting them first, or is it just controlling them? It's not putting them first, right? It's in your life, it might feel that way, but it's you doing what you want in that situation. It's you asserting what you think should happen in that situation. It's a judgment call. And real love, like being able to coexist with people that we love deeply, is getting to know them intimately. And we do that by asking questions, right? We do that by supporting them, right? How many times, and you know this, because especially with, this is an age-old complaint between, if we're going to say heterosexual men and women, where the woman wants to talk about something, the man, the moment she starts talking, is like, why don't you do this? I think you could do that. I know somebody. I like, just fix. And it's so dehumanizing when you're on the receiving end of that. Like, I'm not a problem for you to fix. I used to get so mad when I was first with my husband because, I had multiple careers before we even got together. I was already in my 30s before we got married, and he's 10 years older than me. And there was a part of me, I'd be so mad. I'd be like, do you actually think that you know what I should do more than support me in my not knowing? You have to be able to hang with that uncomfortableness of me being upset, having total faith. I'm going to figure it out because it's my friggin' life, and I will. Now, that doesn't mean I never brainstorm with my husband. I never say, hey, what do you think about this? Of course we do. But it wasn't that. It was the auto advice giving. He was auto fixing. And this was obviously many years ago. But when I got to now, he'll be very much like, are we brainstorming? Like, what are we doing? Are you seeking input or are you not? Like, he knows. He's like, you just need to vent. And the most helpful thing you can do as a guy who wants to be of service, who wants to be the hero, is to ask the people in your life, how can I best support you right now? What would be helpful? What would feel supportive? Sometimes Vic will say, how can I best support you? And I'll be like, let's just make out, or let's go for a ride, or let's have a cup of tea, or whatever, right? But if you ask that, what you're doing is you're respecting the sovereignty of the people in your life to be self-determined. And I'm not talking about 15-year-olds, right? I'm talking about people who are already grown up.
I just heard a bunch of guys, including myself, hear that. How can I best support you? And you said, let's make out. If that happened, that's a great place to start for a lot of guys. The other thing, though, Terri, seriously, that I heard also in that, or I thought, you got me thinking, stereotypical man, woman. She wants to talk about the issues, and he's supposed to listen, not fix. On our side, and I'll own it for me, I hadn't thought about it, but the tendency not to share. I don't want to come home and share the stuff is because I think one reason is I don't want somebody to offer a fix like that. And I'm afraid of that they will. So I just don't talk. I just don't offer. And I wonder if I'm going to stereotype a lot of men in that what would we be more prone to if we felt safe in that? Because like that, I'm not going to do that to another guy because I know their tendency is to want to fix. So I'm just not going to share it with you unless I'm specifically looking for a fix.
Right. But I think that's really insightful. I think that's very common if we're looking at cisgender men.
Right.
But here's the thing. You can also say, this is becoming fluent in the language of boundaries is like becoming fluent in an actual language where if you say, hey, I'm in this situation, I would warn people, my auto advice giver friends, I would say, I'm actually not seeking input. I really just need to vent. So I'm not looking for suggestions. Straight to their face. I'm not looking for suggestions. I could set them up to succeed, or I can wait until they give the suggestion and then say it, but I'd rather set them up to succeed. What I'm really looking for is just a compassionate ear. That would be so helpful. Say what you need, and then you get what you need. Because what you're doing, though, Kev, is that you cut yourself off by not sharing what you grapple with, by feeling like that'll be a burden to someone else, or you don't want to reject their advice that you don't think is good. Because listen, let's be honest. How many people's advice do we actually value in the world? My, not a lot. Me personally, It's a very small number, especially if it comes to my business. I'm specifically going to a person because they know about my business. I'm not asking everyone in the world what they think because I don't care what they think. It's not helpful to me, So I think that learning to ask for what you need, because when you don't, your relationships stay more surface because your struggle is also valuable. You figuring something out and being vulnerable to your wife, your kids, whomever. And listen, kids are a different story. Even adult kids, I have a tendency to keep. For my 2 cents on parenting adult children, there's tons of things I would talk to my friends about. I would never talk to my sons about, right? Sex with their father being one of them, but many other things as well, where there's still more of a focus on them. What are they doing? How are the grandbabes? What's happening with the new job? Blah, blah, blah. So, and I'm not saying I never talk about myself. I do, but I don't expect there to be like a 50-50 thing like I would in a friendship. Because parenting, even when we move into the appropriate stage of parenting adult children, because that changes as well, we're still parents, right? But that doesn't mean we have the right to auto advice give or to weigh in or to be critical or to tell them you've got this great, better idea. The way they're doing it, you've got a better idea of doing it. Because that is so diminishing to other people. So I don't know, long way around the barn. Did I even answer your question?
Yeah. And you've got me back thinking about the aspect of responsibility, even with my adult kids, but with my, with my wife, with my friends, business partner, whatever, to have something and to kind of go back to what you said to your sister. I'm thinking about that now again, of saying, man, I am here for you. I'm here for you. If you need help, I'm here for you. Not that I would say it out loud, but almost internally, I need to say, but it's not my responsibility. It's not my responsibility. And I can even say, there's probably a place to even say that. And maybe, you did in essence to your sister, that your life, your problems are not my responsibility, but I do care about you. I am here.
Right.
And if you specifically need help, what?
Yes, but here's the thing.
Okay.
The person who needs to hear that it's not your responsibility is you.
Yeah.
Not them. My sister didn't think it was my responsibility. I was just playing out this dysfunctional boundary dance with her that I'd been playing out our entire lives until I learned to do better.
Okay. Talk to me about it from a self-identity aspect, especially for, and this is not going to be everybody that's listening, but everybody, maybe, would you say that with people who struggle with boundaries, which is everybody, but let's say on the higher end of the spectrum, that it has become, maybe it's always has been, but it has become a part of your self-identity. So now it's attached to you, kind of like, the issue of beliefs. Our beliefs are dangerous when we have attached them to us. And it's not just an authentic, unbiased out here belief, something that we think happens to, make sense. It's something now we've attached to ourselves. So now we're going to fight beyond what is even the realm of reason, because it's attached to us. So because now we're talking about, and I'm trying to hit to the core of why I've known about this for a while, but I haven't walked it out well, Terri, boundaries, that it's part of myself. I have to change my identity of, I am not Superman. I am not God. I am not responsible for everyone. I'm not supposed to. How arrogant that is. That for some reason that word resonates with me. It helps stem the flow a little bit.
Yeah.
And I've got to detach myself from that. I've been doing it out of a kind of a gritting my teeth. I think maybe that's it. So I've been walking this out some, Terri, with some grit and willpower, which, as we know, is finite. Those are finite things. Not with maybe I haven't achieved. I'm still working on the identity shift. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, but here's the thing. It doesn't have to be your identity. And I know it feels like it is, but we're really just talking about behavior. Because listen, the core of who you are, Kevin, isn't going to change. The core of who I am. If you are a helper by nature, if you're a loving person, if you're an extrovert, if you are attuned to the feelings of others, highly sensitive person, empath, you're still all of those things. And so am I, right? I just learned to deepen the intimacy in my relationships by, I'm still the person people come to, right? I just do it differently. I just ask questions. I just don't do it to strangers anymore. Like you could literally, I'd be indiscriminate. Could be anybody. From my hairstylist to my mailman. Like I swear to God, I would be jumping into anybody's situation if they were in pain or needed help. Now, we're talking about a behavior change, and that what we want to look at is, is there a belief in you that self-abandoning in this service, quote unquote, for other relationships is a requirement to be a good partner, a good father? Because here's the thing with self-abandonment. When you have kids, and you have a lot of kids, when you have kids, and they're younger. Of course, in a healthy family, it is a child-focused system. And notice I didn't say child-obsessed. I just said child-focused because you chose to have kids. They're at the top of the rung of their needs matter. They need to go to school. They need to eat healthy food.
Right.
They need to eat, right? Like dysfunctional families are like focused on the identified patient or the acting out person, right? Where the kids are over here, but then everyone's looking at like the active alcoholic or whatever it is. In healthy families, we are child focused without being child obsessed. So of course, are there ways that things that we don't do when we're raising little kids? Yeah. Is that self-abandonment? I don't think it is. I feel like there's an appropriate amount of self-sacrifice when you are raising small children and even teenage, medium-sized children, that once they're up and out, less of that needs to happen. That's not the type I'm talking about. I'm talking about self-abandonment, meaning you will always drop the thing that might be best for you if someone else needs something. You will always choose to, sort of be last on your own list when it comes to getting your own needs met. Because if your need for peace, your need for harmony, your need for everyone else to have no pain is greater than any other need that you could have, that's what we have to look at. I would say to my therapy clients, right? Your need can't just be, I want no conflict, right? I'm like, there's other needs in there.
That is, you're speaking to the videotape of my life in a lot of ways here. The need to not be in pain, to not have conflict. And as I think about that, the self-abandonment, I think initially early on with our growing family, I did it out of it was a little more joyful. It was a little more willing. And I thought, this is great. And it's probably, of course, feeding some of my own dysfunction. It was, but it was okay. Or I thought it was okay, or I was doing it willingly. And then as time went on, my behavior stayed the same, but it was with gritted teeth. And it was with some bitterness. And it finally took me to an end, which happened a number of years ago. But I realized the bitterness. And it got me to a point of where I am now able to look at things to a degree. I mean, again, I ebb and flow, Terri, of looking at where's my heart in it? Where's my heart in it? Can I get, and I'll never forget, I should have grown more as a result of it, but I'll never forget the time when my wife asked me to run into town to get something. And I, of course, grabbed the keys, dropped whatever anything I was doing and ran and realized I'm gritting my teeth. I'm not doing this. And I came back in and she knew I had been working on some stuff. And I said, you know what? I could go do that. And I know I just said yes, but I would feel a little bitter about it. I'm not in a good place. And she wasn't this way. She did not react like this. She reacted graciously. But in my own story, it was kind of like, oh, I'm so happy for you. You're growing up, honey. It's a big boy move. Is kind of how it felt, because she knows that that's my propensity. And yet still, I don't think I still had it. I have still struggled with having it attached to myself identity. So, now we're into the knowledge and now into the practice of how do I walk this out, which is much of what your book is about. Being a boundary boss is okay. Now let's start practicing it and walking it out.
But before we do that, we're going to introspect. We're going to self-reflect. We're going to look in, because here's the thing. You have a downloaded boundary blueprint, just like I have a downloaded boundary blueprint, which is unique to your life experience, the country you grew up in, the culture, the family system, what number you were in the birth order, like all of these things come together. And then the societal and social norms that you grew up in. So being, religious in the South, I mean, all of this stuff, when we don't question it, this unconscious paradigm, exactly the paradigm shift you were talking about before that needs to happen. This paradigm is unconscious. So much of the beginning work of the book and what I teach is that we got to go into the basement of your mind and go, why am I this way? Do I have to acquiesce to everything someone wants me to do? Am I confusing compatibility with compliance, right? Because they're two different things. And if you're someone who doesn't like conflict, a lot of times we'll just comply with what other people want to
Sure.
avoid the conflict or to avoid being rejected or to avoid whatever it is we're afraid of. So
Yeah.
the going in happens before the going out. Because I could have just written a book with boundary scripts, right? If this were the case, if we didn't need to go in, I could have just been like, just say this in this situation. Here you go. But I didn't, because that doesn't work. If we don't understand why we are the way we are, sustainable change will not happen. You can change for like a little. You can use a script here and there, but it's not the same, because you need to understand why it's hard for you.
Yeah.
Like I needed to understand, why was I that way? The more you understand, the more compassion you can have for yourself, the less judgment, and then the easier it gets to just one baby step at a time change these things. One little preference at a time. And I want to look at boundaries from the point of view of what they are, what I say they are, which is your preferences, your desires, your limits, and your deal breakers.
Yeah.
And they're your own personal rules of engagement that let other people know what's okay with you and what's not okay with you. And when you're the way you are and the way that I was, we're way more focused out than focused in. We're like, how do I control this situation? We can see, oh, there's a conflict about to happen over there between those two people. I'm going to find a way to slither over there and get in between and see if anyone wants something to drink or whatever. Like there's so much bandwidth going out when you have these types of disordered boundaries that it's exhausting. It's hard to know what your own preferences are, you know?
Yes, I do. And your book, I got to hand it to you, Terri, is I love the lists. I have those marked time after time after time. I got them in my notes here.
The back to use?
Well, just so, yeah, well, yeah, that and others. Yeah, it is. It's the back to use. Thank you. It's the back to use. So you write, so yeah, for folks listening, in the book, she writes, here's the concept, here's the story, here's the concept, here's the point, and then back to you. And asking those questions. It was brilliant and just so helpful. And I have them listed out, and I went around and circled them and made notes. Like you just mentioned the boundary blueprint list, which is on page 76. And, and I went along, and you had 3 kind of points there. One of them didn't relate. I felt like I was okay there. And then the next one, were you allowed or encouraged to express your ideas and feelings, comma, especially if they were different from other members of your family? Well, I was encouraged to share my feelings that aligned with my family. Now, there's a very good chance my mom and dad are going to listen to this. So mom and dad, with grace, I don't know. Did you not allow it? Did they not allow it? Or did I just tune in to, as kind of an empath type of aspect of what will get me affirmation and approval? I know what they believe. So I'm going to share with you from a bias of aligning with you because I want your affirmation and approval. I think I just took that and I embraced it hook, line, and sinker on my own. I don't know that they asked me to. I don't know that they forced me to, but I did that. And the next one you have, their next bullet point, when there was a conflict, did members calmly talk issues out, or did they scream at each other, or not talk at all? And I think my parents were so awesome in trying to make a positive, outlook, that we didn't focus on the negatives much. So again, I just tuned into that. Negatives didn't seem to bring a lot of joy, and they might be conflict, and I don't want that. So I'm not going to talk about that. So I went the other way again. Yeah. So these lists, I feel like, I mean, of course I'm here recommending you, or you wouldn't be on the show. In the book, I am recommending because I've been working through it. But just to go through the lists themselves at the end of each chapter and do an audit to become aware of what you're doing and what you're not is worth the price of admission, as they would say. I tell everybody, go buy the book just to do the list, or you should just make the list and do $1,000 course if you haven't already done it. Well, you said you're working on a workbook right now, aren't you?
Yep.
Okay.
But what you're saying though is so true though. And here's the thing with healing these things and figuring these things out. We all make the generous assumption that our folks did the best they could with what they had to work with. So it's not, by us getting it together, is not blaming them. right? But we have to be honest about what were the conditions. At least I look at in my family of origin. In the book, I talk about certain things called forbidden emotions, where I grew up in a house where anger was a forbidden emotion.
Mm.
So I did not learn how to be angry. Now, can you imagine how that would mess up my boundaries, my ability to confront people, to have conversations, to say no to something if I wasn't allowed to be angry? So what you do is, it isn't like I have the power to make anger go away. I would turn it into something else. It would turn into depression, sadness. It was okay to cry. So I could be upset. I just couldn't be angry.
Right.
So that took years in therapy to figure out. But those are the types of things that we figure out about ourselves, which make this process of shifting the way that we relate to boundaries so much easier. And having compassion for, like, there's nothing to feel bad about. If you're listening to this and you're like, wow, I'm a super boundary disaster, you're not. Wherever you are, you're in the exact right place right now to change, to pivot. It's not too late. No matter what you've done, I promise you, I can walk you through it one step at a time. I've helped zillions of people do this. But on the other side of this is much deeper relationships. On the other side of this is joy and a certain amount of relaxation that when you're hypervigilant, you don't have that kind of relaxation because there's always someone or something to be helping, fixing, serving, blah, blah, blah. And that's also not your job. And once we get that we're robbing other people of their sovereignty, even though we're doing it with a loving heart, that made it much easier for me to change when I was like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Right? Who am I to think that I know what every one of my sisters and my mother and all the people in the world should be doing? Let me just, how about keep my eyes on my own paper? What would change in my life if I did that?
Okay. You just hit on, you talk about the aspect of, we as a culture we're doers. We're doers. We're not beers. And one of the more convicting perspectives that I heard as a thread, and I even heard you talking about it, or I felt it there as you talked, a thread through your book. As I'm looking at the doing, because that's what I'm doing. Most of my boundaries are doing things that I'm doing and I'm overdoing. I'm taking responsibility, whatever. And then what everyone associated with me is getting then is burned out, worn out, bitter, exhausted, unfulfilled, whatever, Kevin, as opposed to that's what helps me come over. If I put that mantle on, help to come over and go, no, I do have to tend to myself first, because at the end of the day, what my family wants most is just a joyful dad, not the overburden, not the, like my partner said one time, so you're showing your kids that being an entrepreneur is this hectic, chaotic mess of a life. That doesn't probably seem attractive. Well, right. And it's what I want from if I look at my wife specifically, what do I want from her, or even business partners? What do I want from them? I don't want them all bound up and wound up, and I want them happy. It makes me happy. And so I'd be just as prone to go, guys, just don't do anything for me. Just take care of yourself, go do whatever you need to do and come back, because I'd rather have you joyful. And how do we not take that on? I have missed that for myself. And we're kind of back to the language that you said, learning a different language. If I'm over in Germany with my little app to help me figure out how to say, and I'm sitting there, so I'm aware of every single word, so I got to figure out how to translate it. That's the work then that I feel like we've got to do on this side with the boundaries to go, okay. And it'd be like constant awareness. Like I need a little avatar around tapping me, go, whoa, 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 don't react. Stop.
Yep.
What's going on?
But do you meditate? Do you have mindfulness practices?
Yes. I'm not going to say they're perfect, but yeah, I'm making more of an effort to do that.
I would say get really committed to at least once a day, 10 to 20 minutes of, even if it's guided meditation. I've got 1 million guided meditations on Insight Timer that are free. I mean, it's so easy to do it now, because I have to say, this has always been a core foundation. I've been teaching meditation for many years for my therapy clients, because what happens is when you actually have a daily practice, in my experience, I gained about 2 to 3 seconds of response time.
Wow.
That's all I needed to make a different
Mm.
choice and not be in constant react mode, react. Because I could never do it before I meditated consistently. It was always after the fact where I was like, oh God, why did I hit send on that email? Or why did I say that thing? Or why, like I was a little bit of a hothead, I would say. And I could get so ego jacked up in like 2 seconds flat. Once I started meditating, I was like, nah, I don't want to live like that. I'm not. I'm going to pause. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to buy myself time. This is part of the whole thing that I teach you in the book and in my courses. Like, you don't owe anyone an insta yes about anything. You teach people how quickly you're going to get back to them. You teach people how to treat you. That if I ask you, you should say immediately yes, because they're used to you doing that, let's just say. But you don't owe that to anybody. And so part of it is this process of becoming masterful at boundaries means that you're going to teach people something different. That you're going to start learning language to say, hey, I have a 24-hour decision-making policy. I'll let you know tomorrow. Or I need to check with my partner or check with my calendar, or I don't know if I have the bandwidth to help you with that project. I will go take a look at the data and get back to you in 2 days. Buy time for yourself, because it's so much easier to say no if you haven't already given an insta yes.
Well, then Terri, I mean, you're somewhat calling to the mat then our own expectations of others that I'm then relating to myself. Because if I contact you about something, my personal desire is to get an immediate response.
Yep.
It's just what I want. Patience is not my strongest gifting, and I would like to have that response. Now, so I'm going to flip that around then. And when you contact me, I feel responsible to respond immediately, because that's my own vernacular. So so for me to do what you're talking about, I got to call in my own expectations and do some auditing.
Right. But what you're really talking about though, Kevin, is respecting the boundaries of others.
Yeah.
And when you haven't respected your own, and when you've sort of trampled over others, when you don't say no, when you want to say no, and then other people have the gall to say no, wow, that really pisses you off as a people pleaser.
Absolutely.
As an overfunctioner, as an overgiver, you're like, you're kidding, right? After everything I've done for you, hello? Like, that's what comes into mind. Because with this overgiving train, it's just, there's only one stop on that train, and it's just bitter land. That's it. We end up bitter. We say we're not going to. So many, we see the stereotypical quote unquote like mothers that are like, martyrs, basically. You don't think that when that mother was 21, she was like, well, I can't wait to grow up and be a martyr and torture my family. Of course not. Right. That is not her desire. But if we overgive, especially when people are not asking us to, we will feel used, abused, taken advantage of, even though we can't even see ourselves that we're serving ourselves up. We're doing it. A lot of times people are not even asking. And I would be like jumping in and overgiving and then being like, I can't believe Betty's not going to do that for me after everything I've done for her. Mm-hmm. Well, who asked you to do all that shit for Betty, Terri? Nobody. But you did it. And now there's an expectation. You feel like Betty's on the hook for it, but she's not. So disordered boundaries really gets in the way of our relationships.
Okay. You just brought me back to the idea of control again. And I'm thinking, I'm going to go back to my childhood. Mm-hmm. So I think my primary method or desire of mine as a kid was to have my parents' approval. And I figured out how to get that. And I wrapped myself around that, and I would perform. I was an only child for the first, my next sibling is 7 years younger and then 10 years younger. So I still primarily lived the life of an only child. But my brother, this is kind of at the end of my, right before, not close to leaving or close to leaving the house. And my brother's older. And I figured out how to play my parents for my own benefit. So back to control. And I would use the
Mhm.
word, again, I'm going to say it with grace, but you're helping me see it was a way of manipulating things to get my way. So meanwhile, my brother
Yeah.
could care less. He was just going to be him. He's just him. And if it
Right.
sent the parents off to a tizzy, whatever but I remember thinking that, like, are you stupid? You're pushing all the wrong buttons. You're not going to get anything you want. That was my feeling back then. But what you showcase here is and now I've taken that into life to figure out how to, if I put it in that way,
Mhm.
it sounds really bad, how to play people. And I'm going to serve and give whatever because I want them happy. I want them to think well of me because why? Because I want. And I'm back to feeling selfish. And if we look at that and go, man, all these efforts to be overly responsible and take care of everybody, it sounds so altruistic. And we think of it that way.
Trust me, I'm with you.
And it's not. And you're helping see that and I know, and you don't do this in the book. I'm pulling this out with my own flavor and maybe irritation at myself and whatever. Because your book, you don't. I want everybody to hear that you're much more gracious when I'm speaking it right now. But to look at it and go, man, that's a big aspect of, we said arrogance before, and control and manipulation to get what you want. Well, that puts a whole different spin on it.
Yes, and
And
so to be a therapist, let's look at the flip side.
please,
Of course, you want to get your needs met. And if you had a brother who was acting out, who was probably the scapegoat of the family, because we all have them.
yeah,
That was what his need was. His need isn't your need. Your need was approval and to stay in the good graces and to probably be the hero child. He had a different need. So differentiating from the group. And it's painful because here's the thing with the roles that we play in our families of origin, you don't pick them. The system itself picks the roles. So weird. Nobody told me you're the hero child. I just knew it. Do good in school. Do these things. This sister's acting out. So she's the identified patient. She's the scapegoat. I mean, we're just doing what we can to get our needs met to the best of our ability. There's no handbook of how to do it. You know what I mean? We're just doing the best that we can. So part of it is understanding that was adaptive for you in childhood because it probably did get your needs met. Many of those things become maladaptive in our adult relationships.
Yeah. Yes, they have. And I'm working on it. When you mentioned a minute ago, Terri, meditation and gaining 1 or 2 seconds to give you the opportunity to be self-aware, to respond instead of react. The other thing that hit me, again, from a big standpoint of looking at your book, is how can I I probably can't have good boundaries if I am emotionally unaware, if I'm emotionally unintelligent. One of my therapists a couple years ago, or whenever it came out, had me get Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, to figure out that there's more emotions than one. That I was aware of. And I've known this for a while. I had one before give me a kind of a feelings dashboard type thing. But I feel, as I was, again, reading the book, I thought to do this well, to know the boundaries well, to know myself, to know, you mentioned, what were the 3 things? Your preferences, your desires,
limits, and deal breakers.
To know those, though, I've got to be self-aware and understand what I'm feeling, why XYZ doesn't feel good. If I don't know that, if I don't know why it feels good and what the issue is, how can I create a boundary for it? Is that fair?
Yes. So what I do, because a lot of times that's the biggest overwhelm people have, is to go, I don't even know what my boundaries are. I'm like, but you do. Don't worry. So we start with doing the okay and not okay list, where we just go through every aspect of life, family relationships, work, health and fitness, finances, all the things. And we kind of write down what is working for you, what isn't, what's okay, what's not. So we start with these lists where we're like, okay, some things need to change. But another place that I think is helpful for anybody listening who's like, I don't know where I need boundaries, I'm going to ask you to quickly do a resentment inventory.
Oh, okay. That
because this
terrible,
will show you, it's not hard. We're just thinking about right now. If you think about, what are you feeling any resentment about? Who's the relationship with and what's it about? we can use this little list as a GPS to go, this is probably, because wherever we feel resentment in a relationship is probably where a boundary is needed or a boundary is being crossed. Either way, we know a need is going unmet if you're feeling resentful. So that can help to be like, okay, oh, look, my top 3 resentments are all with the same person. Then you're like, oh, this relationship, I need better boundaries with.
Yeah. Tell me about, this is what, so after I read or, started thinking about emotions and read the piece on, it's interesting. You said that your next book is on the HFC, high functioning codependent, which you said you touched on a little bit. That's interesting because if I was to tell somebody about your book, that's one of the highlights for me that I went into. Well, so can I have your first galley copy of the new book, the high functioning codependent? But what it got me thinking of was the aspect of self-worth. What has it been in me? What is it in me that so needs to appease other people? Why am I not? And I actually, Terri, it was interesting. My first thought, and I wrote it down here, was confidence. I need to be more confident. But I thought that's not it. I have a lot of confidence in my ability, what I can do, even what I think, but maybe not in regards to how I feel. If I'm unaware of that, and then we get into self-worth, which is, play with that with me. Thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's first talk about self-knowledge. When you're someone who is masterful at things, as you are, it can be very challenging to go into an area or a realm where you're not masterful.
Sure.
Like there's a part of our mind that just wants to avoid the crap either we don't understand, or we're like, ugh, this seems heavy and overwhelming and I don't get it. And do I have to blame people and blah, whatever, it's fine. Whatever I'm doing is fine. So part of it is looking at the truth about if you're not masterful at something, it can bring up a lot of resistance to doing anything about it, to understanding. The way that I walk you through it in the book is making it so personal to you so that you can look at, what is it about? Why is it threatening? And so I would say there's a couple of things that I think that we can use. And yes, we'll wrap it back around to the self-worth. But when you're in a situation, and we can talk about your situation, feeling compelled to overfunction or overgive or fix. If you were to, I created this little strategy. It's just the 3 cues for clarity, meaning the 3 questions for clarity to ask. So when you're there, think of the last time you felt that way, let's say. You would ask yourself, right now, who does this person remind me of? Where have I felt like this before? Is the second question. And how is this behavioral dynamic familiar to me? This person has a problem. I want to fix their problem, right? How is that behavioral dynamic familiar to me? And you might even ask a clarifying question, which is, metaphorically, who do I become? And who does that other person become? Do you become your 10-year-old self? And does that person become your brother, a cousin, your parents, somebody? That can be helpful to go, what am I repeating?
Right.
What am I repeating? Because a lot of times, and this is something that, Freud talks about, repetition compulsion is just like we repeat what we do not repair,
That's harsh. But somebody I read in the past year was referencing a patient who was a therapist, a patient. Mm-hmm. And to cut to the point of it, they ultimately said, so you're going to choose to act out this pain with your mother. That's more important than loving your wife. And I hear that in what you're talking about, that if we don't repair it.
Right. But here's the thing about choice. Let's be really clear about when something is in the basement of your mind, it's in your unconscious mind. You don't have a choice. We're compelled. We don't know why. But we're compelled for good reasons. Right. So I don't feel like it's a blame thing. I think it's an evolution thing. It's do I want to understand why I am this way? Can I believe that being a different way will still be satisfying, that I can still love people without controlling them? I can still love people without, quote unquote, saving them. I can still be helpful in a healthy way without dominating, without having it be my need for control.
Yeah.
Talking about, what you and I have been talking about specifically, right? That's not everybody with boundary issues, but that's what we've been talking about. So that's where the choice comes in. Will I choose to learn to be an expert on myself, emotionally and psychologically? Will I get radically curious about why I am the way I am, and then do what I need to shift my relationships into healthier relationships? And here's the thing. If no one is complaining, though, Kevin, like, here's another thing I want to say. I feel this way about drinking. I feel this way about a lot of things, where who am I to say you need to change anything? The only thing you need to change is what isn't working for you, right? The only thing you need to change is behavior that is getting in the way of your relationships being as good as they could be. But if you're happy, if you're like, you know what, my life is a 10, and you were overstepping boundaries left and right and everybody was fine with it, I'd be like, there's no need to change anything. Like, who am I to say? But it's really the identifying the pain points, because that's what we care about. What are the things that we're doing in our lives that are perpetuating a certain amount of pain or discomfort or resentment or exhaustion or whatever it is? Those are the things we need to change. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I'm going to, I'm going to try to be candid, but respectful, that even honestly, as I look at my wife, I would say that there's things, I'd put it both ways, things that we do that are, we'd say not working. Now she tends to be the one that she's going to, pursue conflict. I'd say, there's things that she would have to admit, those are not working. Over here, I'm avoiding. That's what I tend to do. Is avoid. And I might look at it, what's not working. It would be that it's the avoiding. The avoiding is not working. It's my effort to, that was my next point here. It's actually page 14 of your book. And the statement that I pulled out was, you said the fear, I'm paraphrasing, when the fear of disappointing others gets in the way of basic common sense. That stuck out to me. And tell me about maybe this comes back to a self-worth issue too, of for those who have such a significant hang up with disappointing others. That's probably a primary, somebody asked me this recently and I realized that it was my therapist. And one of my I do not want to let people down. I do not want to let the top of the list. I do not want to let people down. I want them to feel cared for. So to disappoint someone, to proactively, consciously say no, have a boundary that might disappoint somebody. And I've questioned, why is that such a big deal to me? Because if I look at that again in the most intimate relationships that I have, if my wife, my kids, if I do that, are they going to abandon me? No. They've proven that because I have disappointed them plenty of time, even my effort not to. So it's not that. I can't look at that and go, well, see, every time I do, I get left. I get abandoned. That did not happen.
Right. But there's a reason you are this way, right? There is a childhood experience that because what we experience in childhood feels very life and death, because we're little kids and because you can't just like go hitch a ride somewhere and get your own house. Like, you are captive audience. And so the fear doesn't have to be anything extreme, right? Like we come to our neuroses like very, very naturally and normally, even if your family system was great, right? And looked great. It has to do with nature and nurture, right? Who you were as a kid, who I was as a kid, and then how we interacted with our environment and how healthy or unhealthy the environment was.
I want to ask though, you said the experience. I want to hone in on that because something just occurred to me. You're going to say, oh, something, there's an experience in your childhood, which a lot of people, including me, are going to look at, and are going to look back at and go, there wasn't some horrific experience. So let me play that out. If I go back and go, okay, I was going to people please, I was going to please my dad. Okay. I'm going to pick on you. I'm going to pick on you, Dad, when you listen to this. Okay. Because it's true. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to say what I think he wants to hear. And I'm going to appeal to him and appease him. And if I don't, what happened? If I didn't, what happened? And I would say, I think because the fear is, I lose relationship. I lose his love.
Yeah.
Did that happen? No. Did
It
he ever
didn't
take
have
me?
to, though.
But I wrote, what can you say? Did I experience that happening, or did I write a story of what might happen? And that's my experience.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. It's that, because here's the thing. It doesn't have to, my whole point is it doesn't have to be a big catastrophic thing to have a lasting impact on children. And again, it's not even about the parents. It's about, we're way grown up, right? We're way grown up. It's our job to go, I am like this. I would like to change the way that I'm interacting with people.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to do less and be more. I would like to relate to people in a more equal way rather than in a controlling way. I would like whatever it is that you would like. And then we slowly but surely put into place what would need to change. And you do this by one healthy boundary or boundary request at a time. Right? It's like you're relating to others like they're your dad and you're like a 6-year-old, right? But what we remind ourselves is that they're not your dad and you're not 6. I had this experience with transference, and I think it could be helpful. I had a boss at my internship when I was becoming a therapist, and I really couldn't stand this guy. And I'd go into therapy and I'd be like, oh, Dr. Washington, he's such a jerk. He's so cold. He's so judgmental. He's so mean. I mean, literally, my therapist was like, have you even interacted with this guy? But I would, like 3 weeks in a row, I came in complaining about how cold and rejecting he was. And then she was like, okay. By week 4, she was like, let's talk about this. Can you describe him again? So I describe him. Brooks Brothers suit wearing, Wall Street Journal reading, martini drinking, probably freaking golfs on the weekend. This was my description. 6'2", dimples, great looking, deep voice. She was like, hello? Who else would you describe exactly like that? I was like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. My father.
Wow.
Every single thing to a T. And I grew up very afraid of my father.
Yeah.
And felt very judged and rejected and all the things that I was putting onto this poor dude who I didn't even barely know. And my therapist said, Terri, do you know what's happening? And I was like, no. And she's like, you're having a transference, right? You're transferring. Like, literally, do you know what happened? Dr. Washington became your father. You became 10-year-old you. So you just avoided him. Like, he would come down the hallway. I would jump into the bathroom to like not pass him. If he was in a meeting, I wouldn't even talk at all. And she was like, here's what's dysfunctional about this. First of all, he's not your father and you're not 10. So we'll start there. But also, because I was so shocked that I didn't see that myself. It was so obvious. When she said it, I was like, oh my God, wow. She was like, but Tara, if you didn't realize it, don't you want to get a job at this place after you graduate? Like, you would never let this guy see how smart you are. Yeah. Because you're too busy acting out this unresolved injury from childhood or whatever. So is there more we need to talk about with your father? And whatever. I mean, I guess there was more to talk about. But from that moment, that realization, I never felt afraid of that guy again. Actually, I did get a job at that place after I graduated grad school. But that's something that if my therapist hadn't pointed it out to me, I might have just continued on. And I wouldn't describe my childhood as abusive. Yeah. I wouldn't describe it as overtly anything, but that was still deep in there. So knowing ourselves is very helpful.
That feels like the point that I'm not going to say I was never exposed to it, but I didn't attach that yet to boundaries. So we hear about the aspect of boundaries, you explain it, and it sounds reasonable. It sounds, necessary to have boundaries. Of course we got to have boundaries. We can't just, give everything away. But without the self-awareness, without understanding it, which again, if I go back to your list, which I just, the page 32, you have the boundary list, page 53, the high functioning codependent list, page 59, holy smokes, the perfectionist list. And as I looked at that, and, maybe I'm way over on the spectrum, but I think that everyone reading that That's why I would write that. But that's why you're here. I want people to go through and audit themselves and understand and go, oh, just like you. Oh, I'm transferring this dude onto my dad. You're totally unaware. And how many of us are here, and we get the concept of boundaries, but we're unaware of ourselves and where we're going. And that's where I've been. I just had a hard time attaching myself and going through literally the list here. I started marking them off, and it helps it almost has me thinking about, you're helping us not just with the concept of boundaries, but the psychology behind it. Well, our psychology behind it. Maybe that's it. Not the psychology so much, even as our psychology. And if I go in and understand my own propensity for this, then I can actually hit the root issue, as opposed to otherwise, I hadn't thought about that, Terri. Otherwise, doing the boundary, just trying to do it, say no or whatever, feels kind of like, it feels like a Band-Aid. It feels kind of artificial, and I can't own it.
And you won't be able to keep doing it, is the point. Because if the original injuries are never addressed, you will eventually go back to that other behavior because it's serving you in some way. Yeah. So I told you the story about Dr. Washington because this is other people. You can identify where you might be having a transference in your own life by just asking those simple questions. Who does this person remind me of? If I had asked that one question, I would have decoded that myself without my therapist. He reminded me so much of my father. Where have I felt like this before? And how is this behavioral dynamic familiar to me?
Yeah.
And why is that helpful to know? Because sometimes our boundaries are disordered in adulthood because of unresolved crap from childhood, that this little strategy, these 3 questions for clarity, can help you. So we can put them in the show notes too.
Well, and you brought up, and I know that's a significant part of the book or of a section of the book, is looking at what we're doing and realizing that we are, is actually chapter 4, in the boundary blueprint area, the secondary gain. The secondary gain is the unobvious gain we receive by staying stuck in unhealthy patterns of behavior. And to look at that and realize I'm getting something out of it. I'm not in jail. I'm not being forced at gunpoint to do this stuff. I'm doing this thing. I'm missing the primary gain that I could have by having a boundary and addressing this unsustainable, back to what you said, what is not working. If we look at every relationship and say, what is not working? Where am I? And for me, I tend to think, what's not sustainable if I'm going to have a healthy relationship? I'm enduring this, but what is not okay? And then and there's a primary gain I could have. Right now, I'm stuck in the secondary gain. I am getting something out of it. By avoiding, I am getting something. By not having a boundary and fixing it, I am getting something. I'm still self-serving.
Yes. And so asking the question, because you can use the secondary gain tool that I put in the book for any place where you see yourself stuck in life. Any behavior that you go, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. But you keep doing it.
Yeah.
There is an unobvious gain. You're being protected in some way. So the questions you ask is, what do I get to not face, not feel, or not experience by continuing to engage in this behavior or by staying stuck here? Yeah. Is an easier way of saying it. So if we look at overfunctioning, let's say, or overgiving or whatever, what do you get to not face, not feel, not experience by continuing to do it?
I'm going to land us here. I feel like you're going back to meditation and your statement of getting a second or two of pause before that reaction. At the line, I pulled this out, and this is somewhere in chapter 4, I think. And you said, so this is what I want to embrace. Maybe this is the tattoo that I'll get finally, is, am I giving from a place of love or a place of fear or need? How does this feel? So somebody's asking, or there's something I think I should do. There's an expectation to fill. There's something to do. Am I doing it? Do I really feel a desire to do it? Like, yeah, I really want to do that. I want to help with that. Or am I doing it out of a fear or a need? And I think a lot of mine, I'm going to have to play with that with each thing. But I think some fear, but a lot of it's just need. I need to fulfill my self identity. I need to fill that thing that tells me that I approve of myself because I did XXX. I did more, and I'm feeding this thing because without it, and then I'm back to self-worth, I think.
Right. Because your value is not what you do. Your value is who you are. And I think that's hard when you're a doer and when you're productive and when you're kind of a type A-er. And I think you probably are. I definitely am. That the whole productivity thing. And what did my husband and I do our gratitudes at night. Every night we say, like, what are we grateful for? What are we excited about? And what are we proud of? Which is hard because, we all come from the school of thought of being like, it has to be amazing to be proud of something. Yeah. So when you're in the gratitudes, I said to him, listen, we have to stop. Our productivity cannot be our only gratitude. Like, I'm grateful that I got that done. I'm grateful that I did this. I was like, our life cannot be about what we're producing only. It's got to be about all the other stuff too. And he was like, you're right.
That would be the exercise for me. As at the end of the day, what am I proud of that I had been, not that I did? Okay. Yeah. Well, if we can just do this every week, Terri.
It'll be cured in no time.
We'll do a live podcast every week of Kevin working through his boundary issues. Seriously, it's so good. I have the book so marked up. I've got the cover behind me there and it's torn up. I'm gonna have to get another one. But I'm working in this, but this is going to be a while. This is a primary thing for me. Thank you so much for being here. I'm eager to talk more about this, but it's such a gift, so needed. I need it. I know so many others do as well. So thank you for being here to impart it to me and to my audience, Terri.
Thanks for having me, Kev. I appreciate you.
Terri Cole's book, again, is Boundary Boss, the essential guide to talk true, be seen, and finally live free. And her popular podcast is The Terri Cole Show. Friends, thank you for tuning into Self-Helpful, where I curate the sea of new personal development materials and help you integrate wisdom into your life, because we all want to elevate our own experience and improve the way we show up for others.